Right now, on a Wednesday from the Seaport, Greeny Graziano is here with the very latest on the inside, and we've got plenty of acumen getting ready to go today. Dominique Foxworth is with us, and let's call D. Wood the maestro today, the piano virtuoso. If there's anything that I'm promising you, it is that someone will play that piano on television today. All that and more as we get this thing going. But we start with these maestros. Oh, the legendary quarterbacks on the field this weekend, beginning with Patrick Mahomes. He could make his third straight AFC Championship game with a win over the Browns on Sunday. He would be the fifth quarterback ever to make it to three straight AFC Championship games. Brady versus Breeze, obviously, is the matchup of legends. We know 84 years of quarterback on the field there. And then Aaron Rodgers looking to make the NFC Championship game for the fifth time in his career. And as he spoke about it yesterday, you can tell he feels good about his chances.
I feel like we thought we could win it last year. That kind of hit our confidence maybe a little bit. We didn't maybe have the exact same type of belief. I feel like we have a lot of confidence this year. We believe in ourselves. Last year we were just so up and down. I think that's been the biggest difference offensively is we're playing with a lot more confidence.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack about this, and clearly this is such an incredibly important game, an important run for his legacy. But Dan, I just want to start with you quickly. You covered their NFC Championship game a year ago when they got obliterated, and you're doing the game this weekend. How different do you see this Packer team from that one?
Yeah, I think what he's saying about confidence is true. And I remember talking to Matt LaFleur at the beginning of this year and asking him about Aaron Rodgers, and him telling me he loved where his state of mind was, that he felt like Rodgers was in the exact right place mentally going into this season. Obviously, the season has borne that out, and the confidence has only grown. So I think there was always a sense, this is LaFleur's second year, that the offense was something that was going to take some time to put together. I remember we talked about it on this show and others last year, but it's coming true. And I think we've seen the offense and Aaron Rodgers operate at a much higher level. As a result, I think they feel a lot better going into this game.
Isn't that fascinating, Dominique? Because we spoke so much about the psychology of Aaron Rodgers when they drafted his replacement and everything else. Now here he is in a great place. And let's talk about what another championship could mean for his legacy. He is an all-time great player, but a second championship might change a lot.
Yeah, I think that he might be under the most pressure. We talked about this a couple weeks ago because this is a legacy-defining, kind of legacy-elevating type of run for him in season. He could end up being the regular season MVP, get his second Super Bowl win, which then puts him on par with Manning and Elway. Also, potentially get a Super Bowl MVP. All that is great, but you put on top of it that he may have to go through Tom Brady or Drew Brees, and then potentially the young gun Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl that we all like to talk about as potentially being better than him. This is a thing that will change the way we think about him going forward. I know we all have a ton of respect for him now, but as time goes on, we get further and further away from his career. We're going to look at those numbers, and the numbers that we first look at, how many, for quarterbacks at least, how many Super Bowls did you win? And if he can get two like some of those other guys, I think it'll change the way that he is remembered.
I think that's right. We just saw Peyton Manning there, who won his second in his final year. John Elway, who won his two championships in the last 2 years of his career. What do you think it means to him, D. Wood?
Well, listen, I agree a lot with what Dominique said. I think when we think of Aaron Rodgers, to me, he's the most talented passer of the football of this generation. But you always look at his career and you would say, man, he's put up some eye-popping stats and all those type of things. But he only has one Super Bowl to account for all of that back in 2011. Well, if he goes through this road and he beats these quarterbacks that are potentially lined up, and he wins the NFL MVP this year, to me now that elevates him in the line of where Peyton Manning is. That's where I think this whole postseason is shaping up for Aaron Rodgers.
What we'll talk about as we go, though, is, he may have to get through Brady or Breeze and then Mahomes, but getting through Aaron Donald this weekend might actually be the hardest of them all. We will get to that as we continue. Meanwhile, let's talk about the other NFC game, because you got Tampa and New Orleans, you got the legends, and the Buccaneers offense has been on an absolute roll of late, averaging just over 35 points and close to 500 yards over their last 5 games. However, against the Saints this year, it's been the opposite story. As you see, New Orleans held them to just 26 points total in their 2 meetings and just over 250 yards a game. So I can see this going one of 2 ways, Dominique. Those 5 games come since they had their bye. So maybe they self-scouted and figured some stuff out, Or maybe we could look at the competition that they've played, which has been less than outstanding, including in the playoff game last week, and sort of downplay that. What do you think the Buccaneers are looking at offensively this weekend?
Yeah, I think the Bucs have a big hill to climb offensively this weekend. Like, I lean more into the idea that they were playing against not great talent, then they figured it all out all of a sudden. Obviously, they have plenty of talented playmakers on that team. And obviously, any weekend they could potentially blow up, but they haven't done it against a top-tier opponent like the Saints, and I haven't seen anything that suggests to me that things are going to change. It's really important, I think, for them to get out to a good start. That's what really killed them in their last game against the Saints, is they were under it before the game started, and it allowed the Saints' defensive line to kind of get after Tom Brady. And I'm sure we all have heard ad nauseum that Tom Brady has stunk under pressure. But the one matchup that I think that we need to focus on is Gronk versus Jenkins on defense. Gronk is a guy that can get open quick, but when they've played against the Saints, Jenkins has pretty much bottled them up early in the game, and then it's gotten out of hand. So Gronk is going to have to find a way to get open, and I think Tom Brady is going to feel comfortable hitting him in those situations, and that potentially can open up the rest of the offense.
I like that thought. I also like the idea about them starting quickly, because Rex in particular has talked so much here about how effective they've been with play action. Well, if they get way behind and they can't run the ball, you don't get any of that. What do you think, D. Wood? The last time these teams played each other, it was 38-3 New Orleans. Why is this time going to be different?
Well, listen, a couple of things. Number one, that was back in November 8th. That's over 2 months ago. This team is a lot different than it was back then. The offensive line has improved dramatically. Brady has only been hit like 12 times, like been sacked 12 times since that game. I mean, he's been, just sitting back in the pocket making things happen. Antonio Brown is a different element in this offense now that he's been more acclimated. So, listen, I think Brady is playing with a lot more confidence, and I get, what you guys are talking about as far as, the opponents, but I just think that this Tampa Bay offense is a different offense, has a lot more confidence than the last time they played New Orleans Saints back in over 2 months ago.
I'm inclined to agree with that. It should be pointed out the 5 teams that we're talking about, or the 5 games we're talking about, 2 of them were against Atlanta, then Minnesota, Detroit, and last week in the playoffs, Washington, who has a good defense but finished very good under 500. What do you think of this matchup that the Bucs and Brady got here?
I feel like the Saints take it as a point of pride to still be better than the Buccaneers, right? They were geared up for those 2 games this year, and they won them fairly easily. It's their division 4 years in a row. They don't love the idea of the Buccaneers throwing something together on the fly and all of a sudden being better than they are. And I think, fundamentally they're a bad matchup for Tampa, because I think their offense is built to stress Tampa's defense more than a lot of the others you were just running through. But to me, the key is what Damien Woody was talking about, which is the pass protection, right? Against Washington, a nasty defensive front and pass rush, it held up. Right, and Gronkowski has been asked to help with the pass protection more in recent weeks, which is maybe why his offensive numbers aren't the same. So they've got that a little bit figured out. So if they can do that, then I think they're in the game more than they were. But I still think, in the end, the Saints. I mean, we talk about Aaron Rodgers. Drew Brees only has 1 Super Bowl, and this could be his last game if they lose. He turns 42 on Friday. Like this could be it. So I think there's a lot of motivation there in New Orleans, even beyond just this is the playoff.
For sure. I think the overwhelming expectation is this will be Brees' last run. Whether this, if they lose here, we'll see what winds up happening. So yes, legacy redefining for 2 different quarterbacks is where we begin today, possibly for Drew Brees and possibly for Aaron Rodgers. Meanwhile, let's run the hurry up here, Graziano. A bunch of notes. I want to hear what's going on with Urban Meyer.
Yeah, well, everyone does, right? He's talking to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and a lot of people around the league are waiting to see how this situation shakes out before the coaching carousel can really get spinning here. There's a sense that it could be his job if he wants it, and they're waiting to see how that all settles. I know he has been in conversations with at least one other team, the Chargers, but I'm not sure exactly how far down the road that is or how realistic it is. Jacksonville looks like it's a spot for Urban if he wants to make the job to the NFL. Detroit Lions have an opening. Are we all right?
Well, that sounds like a fire alarm or something like that is going off in our studio. Just keep going.
Detroit Lions have an opening. They've interviewed 5 candidates, and we may not care about this in a few minutes, but they talked to Matt Campbell, the Iowa State head coach. He decided ultimately to stay put. There are other candidates they're talking to. The concern here is Matthew Stafford. What's the organization going to do with him? If they're going to move on from him, that makes the job look different to candidates. Eric Bieniemy, one of the candidates that interviewed for that job. He's interviewed with 5 teams. It's possible he'll interview now with the Texans, although they can't interview him until after the Chiefs' season is over because they didn't make a request to interview him last week when the Chiefs were on bye. Obviously, we know the situation there with Deshaun Watson, and it's become out that he likes Eric Bieniemy, wanted the team to consider him. So, yeah, it's possible they're just doing this to make him happy.
Well, let's pick up the thought there. And again, our apologies for that distraction. Hopefully that whatever that alarm was is not serious and we can continue to do the show here and we will do the best we can. Now, with that thought in mind, again, Deshaun Watson seems to have wanted or been interested in at least a conversation with Eric Bieniemy. It's a conversation that now, as you say, cannot be had until after the Chiefs' run ends. Andre Johnson, who's one of the great players in Texans history and generally not known to say much, tweeted, "If I'm Deshaun Watson, I will stand my ground. The Texans organization is known for wasting players' careers. Since Jack Easterby has walked into the building, nothing good has happened in or for the organization, and for some reason, someone can't seem to see what's going on. Pathetic." DeAndre Hopkins, who himself was traded out of Houston last year, copied up on that and tweeted, "When Dre speaks, listen." So let's come out and talk about this a little. There are very few hard, fast rules I have in life, Dominique, but one of them is when a quiet man speaks, listen. Andre Johnson really almost never, I didn't know what his voice sounded like when he was a great player in the National Football League.